Time and the costs involved in getting things done, basically. A report by the World Bank has found that there are improvements when it comes to the ease of doing business in South Africa, but the pace of cutting the red tape is slow. The report looked at regulations for small and medium-sized businesses in 9 cities: Buffalo City, Cape Town, Ekurhuleni, eThekwini, Johannesburg, Mangaung, Msunduzi, Nelson Mandela Bay and Tshwane. To discuss, we're joined by World Bank project leader Moussa Traore. Thank you for being with us. Moussa. So the premise is that government can't say we're going to help small businesses and they will create jobs if at the same time it's wrapping them up in red tape, basically.
Well, that's the goal of a study like Doing Business, is to find out where there are constraints to doing business and where things are working well, where the processes are really in place and they're streamlined to enable business.
So where are the problems right now? What's really hampering small business?
Well, so what we've noticed is that, on average across South Africa, South African locations, the cities that we've measured do quite well with regard to time to complete regulatory processes in 3 areas. So dealing with construction permits, registering property, and enforcing contracts. Nonetheless, in getting electricity, time is relatively slow, and also the number of procedures that are involved in carrying out these regulatory processes is still quite high, and costs also need to be further streamlined.
Let's look at just one of those. I think Nelson Mandela Bay, you said cut the time to get an electrical connection in half to 6 months. Yep. That means it used to take a year. So you want to open a business and it takes you a full year just to get a power connection.
Yeah, it did. So we've seen tremendous improvement in Nelson Mandela Bay, right? Emerging from strikes back in 2015 and really putting in place a getting electricity improvement team, which worked on streamlining processes within the municipality so that they could make this improvement where they cut time to obtain an electrical connection by 5 months.
But 6 months still seems like a long time. How does that affect small businesses?
Well, for sure, one thing is for sure, it's that it can constrain business when processes are not streamlined. But I think it's equally important to note that Nelson Mandela Bay came from very far, right?
Yeah.
It really did significantly close the gap.
Okay, and that was after you released the report 3 years ago.
Yes.
So Treasury asked for this. South Africa asked for this report. It's being funded by foreign donors. So I guess the question is it working? Is it helping? Are cities responding?
I think it's definitely working, and that's precisely why we see reforms being implemented. We saw 5 of the cities that were measured that have implemented reforms since the last time round. We saw that cities engaged in peer learning, sharing good practices amongst themselves in order to learn. So I think it is working, and it is really worth it.
Your press release, and maybe you're being nice here, saying there are improvements in 5 of the cities. 5 out of 9. Does that mean 4 are just sitting on their hands?
Well, no, it partly also means that, there are things that made doing business more difficult. So we saw that in all of the locations, the cost for construction approvals went up. We saw that there was an increase in costs to register property. So there are things that can happen that also go in the other direction.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that those cities were necessarily sitting on their hands. It could be that they tried to improve, but there were also things that went in the other direction.
But surely political will matters.
And that is one of the main messages that comes across in the report, which is that, you need the political will and collaboration within the city amongst the municipal departments and also with the national government and the local governments in order to really improve local business conditions.
But besides power, the time to get connected, what else sort of target areas could really help?
Well, in terms of targets as to how locations can improve in the future, for us, the way we see it is that peer learning is the major thing that the cities can do in order to improve. And I think that we see that, just to kind of give you an example, if Johannesburg adopted all the good practices that are present in the Getting Electricity indicator alone, so the ones that are found across South African locations, it would go up so high in the ranking as it's measured in the Global Doing Business report.
So that's sad. So some cities are really getting things right, but they're not passing that on to other cities. Who drives that? National government maybe forcing people moving around? I don't know. Well,
there are multiple drivers, right, for this type of peer learning effort. From what we've seen, some of the cities have done it on their own. Some of it was facilitated by the City Support Program, which sits within the National Treasury itself. So, the cities have some kind of support that is available to them in actually reaching out to each other and implementing reforms.
And only 3 of the cities are monitoring the reliability of electricity supplies. So surely that monitoring is important to see when you're falling down, when you're picking up.
You said it exactly right. It's very important because monitoring electricity essentially allows you to find out where there are constraints, where electricity supply is not reliable. So from our standpoint, this is a significant improvement, right? And something that could be modeled, that could be extrapolated to other cities as well.
So we're trying to attract investors from all over the world. This is important, the ease of doing business. If we had to benchmark globally, how are South African cities doing?
Well, you know, I think it's interesting because it's hard to say because no city comes out necessarily on top across all of the indicators. They all have something good to share. So for example, if I were to take, you know, Cape Town is one of the top performers in the area of dealing with construction permits. It has one of the top 30 fastest times to register to deal with construction permits. So, you know, we see that across the cities there is variation in performance and they all have something to learn from each other.
And Durban, is this a problem? Because you look at bottlenecks, the largest port in the world, in the country, but the slowest in handling of goods. Surely that not only impacts small business, but everyone involved in trade.
Yeah, and you know, this is definitely an area for improvement, streamlining of processes. The way that, you know, we look at it in the report, especially for exports, we find that the time for the requirements at the border still need to be streamlined on a large part across South Africa, across all the ports that we've measured. So, you know, that's an area of improvement, and that improvement can be achieved through better coordination and streamlining the processes and integrating the members of the value chain into, you know, a one-stop shop or a single window system.
All right, hopefully if we chat in 3 years' time, those improvements have snowballed. Will it be 3 years before the next report?
Well, whenever we are invited back to do another study, then we'll be back to do it.
All right, thank you for your time this evening. That was World Bank project leader Moussa Traore.